And with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists for today's webinar. So there have been some changes in the student loan world that we think are important for you all to know about. So our panelists today are Melissa McGuire, who's the student debt expert and product designer at Student Debt Solutions. And she has over 10 years of certification and experience in the student debt market. And with her is Dave Danielson, the CEO of Student Debt Solutions. And Dave is a seasoned senior executive in the consumer debt markets with proven leadership experience. Melissa, take it away.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. The topic today is IDR forgiveness resumes. And why does this matter? So there's been a lot of changes, and let's just start with the headline here. Essentially, borrowers who have reached 20 or 25 years of forgiveness are going to be able to restart. So essentially, the restart is a result of agreement between the AFT and the Department of Education. There's been some legal challenges, and it's combined with the SAVE plan litigation. So I really hope, that I'm not saying a lot of big acronyms and words that everyone isn't familiar with. So at any time, please put in questions if you have questions like, what is SAVE? I hope that a lot of us do know what that is, working in the housing space and with student loan borrowers, but you may not. But essentially, during the Biden administration, there was a repayment plan that was created called a SAVE repayment plan. It replaced an existing repayment plan called the revised pay-as-you-earn plan. It was created through a process of I want to say executive authority, and it was created through negotiated rulemaking. So it wasn't congressionally approved. There was some lawsuits that were placed against it. Some states said, this is definitely not legal in essence. So I don't want to get into all of the details, but there have been a lot of legal challenges. That essentially has created a large domino effect in the student loan space. IDR in general is being able to repay back your student loans on an income-driven repayment plan. This means that your monthly payments are set to a percentage of your discretionary income. So pretty commonplace. The oldest one is called income-based repayment. There have been other iterations of this along the way. Income-contingent. Well, first we started with income-sensitive. So there's always been this essence of being able to pay your student loans on a monthly basis through an income plan. This really benefits borrowers. I'm sure that in the housing space, we see that, income driven can really matter when it comes to improving DTI and things of that nature. But the legal challenges that SAVE presented essentially did create a large domino effect because of the interpretation of the court decisions that kind of held SAVE in a limbo, essentially. And that limbo really then had effects on pay-as-you-earn, income-contingent repayment, and also income-based repayment. So we haven't reached a decision. It's not that AFT versus the Department of Education has been a legal challenge that now there is a decision, but there has been an agreement that's been made. And just to give you a sense of how important this is, right? A sense of scale. There's currently 2.5 million borrowers that are enrolled in one of the pay-as-you-earn, ICR, or income-based repayment plans. As far as SAVE repayment goes, SAVE because borrowers essentially defaulted over to SAVE or enrolled voluntarily. We have the majority of income-driven repayment borrowers who are opting into IDR repayment. They are sticking with SAVE, and there's over 7 million borrowers in SAVE. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So there's a large portion of people with SAVE, smaller, but still at scale, 2.5 million borrowers who are under PAYE, ICR, or IBR, and thousands of them have technically already completed their repayment term, right? So with income-driven repayment, after you reach 20 or 25 years of forgiveness, you get the remainder of your balance forgiven. Typically, the forgiveness that takes place after 20 or 25 years is a taxable event, meaning the Federal Department of Education will send you a cancellation of debt, and that will be claimed as earned income to the borrower who received the cancellation. And so there's taxation that would occur. So it is really great for reducing the student loan payment. However, one of the downsides is, and as counselors, we should always, I won't go on a soapbox on it, but we should always be informing individuals that there is taxable consequences associated with income-driven repayment. And so that happens at the end of the term. Well, we have thousands of people who essentially right now have completed their repayment terms, but are not receiving the forgiveness. And so as we say IDR forgiveness resumes, that's really important for these thousands of individuals. But the agreement that was reached between AFT and the Department of Education is actually a larger scope. And so we're going to go into kind of what this agreement does. Public service loan forgiveness essentially hasn't been directly paused, but because of this pause on implementation of forgiveness around income-driven repayment, there was a ripple effect. And right now we have around 70,000 borrowers that are waiting on public service loan forgiveness cancellation. So that's even larger at scale. So this agreement is, and it was quiet. There wasn't a lot of like news banter about it or headlines. There are a few, but it wasn't rounding the circulation through media, right? And so it's important that we explain kind of what this agreement does for borrowers to this audience, because it really is a massive relief for long-term borrowers, especially those trying to stabilize credit, prepare for home ownership, or resolve just financial hardship in general. The shift in economics in a household, we are strapped with a lot more debt and higher interest rates, right? So if we could reduce or eliminate our student loans, this can have just a massive win overall, holistically, right? For student loan borrowers. Ebony, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the biggest win from this agreement essentially is clarity. Thank you. And clarity is really what's been desperately needed for borrowers, because there's just and we're going to get into some of these other topics a little later on, but we've got really high delinquency right now. And I think that clarity is something that student loan borrowers just desperately need. And so if we can educate people on the front line that are talking to debtors about their financial situation on what's going on with student loans, we've got to get the word out. And so it's really great to be here. So for years, borrowers were told, well, it's really just been this last year, right? So there's been all of this litigation going on, kind of the Department of Education's interpretation of the court decisions. And so the guidance then that the servicers have been saying to student loan borrowers is, hey, if you move from PAYE or ICR into IBR, then no worries, your payments are going to continue to count towards forgiveness. But that's not really been what we've been seeing. What we've been seeing are a lot of pending applications, no forgiveness taking place, regardless. But essentially with this agreement, no matter the payment plan that you're in, things are going to start tracking in the right direction, like that we understood them to always have been. So you can get your PAYE forgiveness, and that time can count, or ICR or IBR. Another big win is that for borrowers who become eligible by the end of this year, so December 31st, 2025, they will still receive tax-free forgiveness. And this is thanks to the American Rescue Plan. So the American Rescue Plan did include any student loan forgiveness that occurred under income-driven repayment, really in a lot of other senses too. Public service loan forgiveness, if you get your debt canceled under that program, it's always been a non-taxable event. But essentially other forgivenesses, and for our topic here today, income-driven, that has been a taxable event. But the last 5 years, that's not been the case. But at the end of this year, we are switching into a space where now we have to go and be concerned about the taxation of student loan forgiveness. So another thing is that even if this discharge happens in 2026, it's still going to be considered a tax-free forgiveness so long that the borrowers have made a move to get into, income-based repayment. So if you've been in SAVE, you've already reached 200 or 240 to 300 months of repayment, then we really have to get into action to switch into another eligible income-driven repayment plan. So the biggest takeaway here for me is that if we're still waiting on forgiveness, if you're a borrower that's in IBR or ICR or pay as you earn, but you've taken the action to maybe apply. Like I have a lot of borrowers right now who are pending. So they've tried to switch or have recently switched into income-based repayment, but they're pending because there is a backlog that has occurred. And we're still trying to weed our way through that and help clients navigate it. So there has been some extensions on typical applications that we see in the space of student loans. But as long as you've taken the action, then technically that is supposed to count. And if you are eligible for the forgiveness this year, then it is going to count. And once that discharge takes place, even if it's in 2026, you won't suffer that tax burden. But a big takeaway here is, borrowers stuck in SAVE, we do want them to, by the end of the year, make a choice into another income-driven repayment plan if they haven't done so already. That would be my guidance as a counselor. There is going to be a benefit because borrowers who have overpaid. So let's take the example that we have borrowers who are eligible for the forgiveness now, and they've continued to pay because the account isn't showing that they've met the term, right? So their account still shows a payment due. If they have overpaid and because they've been continuing those payments so that they don't go delinquent, they will get a credit for reimbursement on any of those extra payments. So they will get a refund. We're also going to start seeing servicer notifications roll out. So this agreement was discussed and created in October. So about a month ago, a little over a month ago. And we've seen some discharge already take place. So it's going to be slow, but the rollout is starting to happen. And so the servicers are going to begin notifying borrowers who are eligible. This could be through the emails or portal updates. So through the servicer portal, so every student loan borrower has access to their servicer online. And so they could have portal updates there. And there's going to be some opt-out mechanisms. And what do I mean by that? Why would a borrower want to opt out of their cancellation or, an ultimate forgiveness of their remaining balance of student loans? The federal tax on forgiveness is currently waived. However, state tax may not be waived. And I am not a savant on state taxation laws. I live in Florida and there is no income tax here. So for that use case example, right, Florida residents, we would not have a taxation by our state. There are, though, about 21 states that exist that could have some level of interpretation on the taxation of debt canceled. So, because some states don't have rules and laws that deem them to follow like federal laws around tax. So, if the government does it, then we do it as a state. Um, that's not clear across the board what every state will implement. So any state that doesn't have an income tax, we're not going to see taxation of the forgiveness happen there. But states will vary, okay? And it really just depends on, do they inherit the federal tax laws, or do they have variations? Because some of the states will say, disability or death, we don't tax on those things for student loans. So they're very specific student loan taxation laws by state. And so it is important that if a borrower is going to have the cancellation, that they understand their tax liability per their state. But that's another thing. So that's where there are opt-out mechanisms, because there could be that state income tax consequences. Ebony, we can go ahead and move to the next. Thank you. So other aspects of this agreement, I think that there are some other key elements that, as housing counselors, that are important here. This agreement doesn't do anything to unblock SAVE. Okay, so SAVE forgiveness does remain blocked. Earlier this year, right, where we actually saw the IDR forgiveness become paused, okay, was because there was a court decision earlier this year, and it expanded the block, and that block then on SAVE actually prevented new enrollments and to stop all SAVE-based forgiveness. So basically, what we've been telling counselors that we speak to, or our own borrowers, is that SAVE's not, you're not allowed to enroll in SAVE anymore, so we don't give guidance on SAVE repayment. We definitely want to make clear notifications around that SAVE is no longer eligible payment plan, and that if you are eligible for public service loan forgiveness and are really working towards that forgiveness in general, because you're in an income-driven repayment plan, that SAVE's probably not the plan to consider. Borrowers in SAVE are currently in a payment pause, but interest is accruing. Okay, so just to make that clear, that this agreement doesn't have any implications on SAVE. That under the agreement too, there was some very specific requests, by AFT. And one of those was through reconciliation, there was some implementation and some language in reconciliation. And IBR basically has been expanded as a result of reconciliation, and that there's no more partial financial hardship requirement. And so this agreement speaks specifically to the fact that, let's not limit income for borrowers who are looking to get into income-based repayment right now. So whether you're trying to leave SAVE, right? Let's say there's a borrower in SAVE and their income financial picture has changed significantly since first enrolling in SAVE. So they haven't had to consider, or maybe they just haven't tried to consider other repayment options. But if they've now have a large increase in income, they may not be eligible for other income-driven repayment plans. But through reconciliation, again, they lifted something called a partial financial hardship. So under income-based repayment, if your 10-year standard repayment plan will be X. So let's say that's $500, right? So let's just try to make this make sense and give you some background. So if you have a standard repayment plan of $500, and that's a payment plan to pay back your loan in 10 years, but your income-driven repayment plan under income base was quoted at 600. So that's higher than the standard 10-year payment plan. And so therefore, you do not have a partial financial hardship. It is a comparison of your income-based repayment to your 10-year standard repayment. So it's really technically not much. It doesn't have a ton of bearing on exactly your financial situation. I've worked with doctors who have a significant amount of student loan debt. So their 10-year standard repayment plan, it could be $4,000, $5,000. So they're able to maintain income-based repayment because it was calculated to be much less than those $4,000 or $5,000 a month 10-year plan payments. So they met partial financial hardship. So IBR no longer has that partial financial hardship according to reconciliation. But the department hasn't really been forthcoming about when they're going to lift and basically submit guidance on that, because the guidance would have to be to servicers. The guidance would have to be, they have to create an implementation plan and update accordingly to lift that partial financial hardship. So we're still waiting on those clear timelines from the department. But through this agreement, it was stated, don't hold income or the partial financial hardship requirements against people who are trying to get into IBR right now, against the borrowers who are getting into IBR. So that's part of the agreement. So that's good. Another part of the agreement was to, basically get some clarity and transparency around the PSLF buyback process. So what is PSLF buyback? This was created, it was created I want to say a decade ago. And the buyback program it allows borrowers to receive student loan forgiveness by making a catch-up payment that covers any period of time in which their plans or their payments didn't count towards public service loan forgiveness. Why is this important? So technically, for borrowers enrolled in Save Repayment right now, let's say they've been in that payment plan for 18 months, but they were also eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Well, the last 18 months are not eligible payments. And so they need to go through what's called the PSLF buyback option. And so a new payment will be basically, this is the borrower telling the Department of Education, like, I want to be considered for public service loan forgiveness. I'm going to get into detail on kind of how to direct a borrower through this. But this buyback process is really important, but it's not been leveraged a lot in the last years. And so the process of enrolling in the buyback and understanding the buyback process isn't very transparent. But this is very important. This program is going to be a way for millions of borrowers to attain their public service loan forgiveness, right? We had 7 million borrowers in Save for however significant amount of time. And the percentage of those that were also public service loan forgiveness eligible need to go through this process. There is the potential. And this has been the guidance, right, by the COO of the Department of Education, that the PSLF buyback needs to be leveraged in these cases. So it's very important. And again, this is going to create transparency and what's kind of going on through that process. Basically, they need to get through their current backlog and to continue to approve and review, not meaning that they have to approve every single PSLF buyback consideration, but they need to continue to go through and review these, they being the Department of Education. And there's going to be some oversight on that process now. So that's part of the agreement. This is very good. And lastly, I think one of the biggest wins is that the department must provide a 6-month status update. And this is going to outline the progress of ICR, IBR, PAYE, forgiveness, and the PSLF buyback. And this basically, it's going to be once a month for the next 6 months. The department having to submit reports to the court. And so they have to have public documents on the court docket with detailed information on the progress of all of the processing of these applications and implementing of the student loan forgiveness under these. So this transparency is really going to help us as counselors really understand what's happening behind the scenes, so that we understand the kind of the appropriate expectations for our clients as this kind of all comes about. We're going to go to the next slide. So at the end of the day, guidance for counselors, right? If I had to share, what are the key elements that you should be aware of? That, again, and how you can make an impact. So to be impactful as we're speaking to our clients, right? So if you've got student loan borrowers, you're going to want to help them identify who is eligible. I think that this is important. There's a way that I do it as a counselor, and tools that I use, because my company, right, we have tools for counselors and for borrowers. So we leverage those to help identify and count the repayment terms. We leverage a file called the National Student Loan Data File. So if you work with student loan borrowers, you should be aware of this file. The National Student Loan Data File is very important in helping to understand kind of all of the past behavior of a borrower, and then the opportunity for really full scope on what all of their options are on repayment. But constantly if you have someone with student loans, and you're like in an intake process and you see they have a student loan, you might want to just ask things like, when did you get your student loan? Or if you have a credit report, you can see maybe the date of origination. When you were repaying your student loan, were you ever enrolled in an income plan? And like, when did you enter repayment on this loan? How long have you been repaying it? So like on first glance, if you see a student loan, and I'm going to use the credit report as an example because that's probably a consistent part of your workflow. If you see a student loan pop up, you might want to ask, when did you start repaying your student loan? And just see like, when did they receive the student loan? If it's been 20 years since they took the loan out, they could potentially benefit from the forgiveness now before the end of the year. And so any client, though, that you see has a student loan, you should encourage them to check their qualifying payment counts. They shut this down. The Department of Education did shut this down for a while as they were updating the systems. And trying to align kind of the court decisions with the payment history, but that payment count should be back up. And so we as counselors should definitely make aware to borrowers that they can see their income-driven repayment history at studentaid.gov. And the other way to do this to verify, and even if it's available there, I would still cross-reference that with the National Student Loan Data File. There's the verified count, right, at studentaid.gov. So studentaid.gov and the Department of Education is now overseeing kind of all IDR forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness. And in the account at studentaid.gov for a borrower, that visibility is all there. There's tools to see like how far you've gotten and your public service loan forgiveness, and typically there was this little box right on the dashboard over to the right-hand side with like an expected forgiveness date and a total number of eligible payments that you've made under your income-driven repayment. And again, like I said, that did shut down for a while. But you can always cross-reference that information to the NSLDS. The NSLDS has all of the in repayment history. It's not perfect because we can see like when they started their income-driven repayment and how long they've been enrolled. You can get that information from the NSLDS, but yeah, you can cross-verify and just see if there's anything significantly off, or if you have any expectations or hesitations that count is correct. Prepare your clients for communication from servicers too. If they think that they're close, give them a little information about what's happening right now, right? That they can at current time, apply for some of these repayment plans again, watch for messages that maybe your loan's been paid in full or you're eligible for a discharge, proactively logging in to their student loan servicer account to see, what is my balance displaying? Do I have any messages from my servicer? So there is a message center for almost all federal student loan servicers. Make sure they're staying in tune with what's going on. Clarify that cancellation, if you do come across a borrower, that cancellation is not instant. Like I said, we are getting some borrowers that are receiving these emails, right, or logging in and seeing $0 balances right now. So it almost seems that some things really did kick into gear quickly after the agreement was established last month, but it could take weeks or months in order to kind of see that discharge if they believe they're eligible for it. Okay. Help clients ensure that they're in the right IDR plan in general. If the guidance from the department was just, we're PAYE and ICR aren't counting right now, but just go into income-based repayment. If they're really close to their forgiveness timeline, there could be potentially a bigger benefit from PAYE or ICR. It really depends. Now, a lot depends on their financial situation and when they got the loans and what type of loans they have. Not everyone is eligible for all of these repayment plans. So, like for instance, for income-based, there's a new income-based and an older income-based. And so when you got the loans and what your rights are through these repayment plans does matter. But just helping clients, to make sure that they're taking a look what their current situation is, and what are some alternative IDR options. Just always, I think it's always just for peace of mind to make sure you're in the best payment possible anytime you talk to a borrower. Also, just connecting these changes to housing outcomes. If you're with a borrower that says, I think my loans are going to get discharged, I think I'm eligible now, what's in it for them? What is the financial outcome for them, right? Well, they're going to have a reduced debt to income ratio, significantly, potentially help their budget, a payment that's dropping to $0, a student loan balance that's no longer essentially disappearing for them. This can really strengthen a client's financial situation, and particularly, right, path to home ownership, or in preparation of refinancing, mortgages. So it's really great stuff. We're going to go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So here is some more involved and in-depth guidance when it comes to SAVE in particular. Okay, so we talked about, right, that the agreement didn't do anything. It's not going to change SAVE. But with the fact that if someone believes that they are close to repayment forgiveness, that they may have 240 or 300 months, right? That's 20 or 25 years. in an income-driven repayment plan, but they're currently in SAVE. They're going to want to remove themselves and get out. There are borrowers that are going to be enrolled in SAVE now, and they're eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So I just really wanted to throw this slide in here as a takeaway. If you are dealing with this, because there are 7 million borrowers that are impacted by this SAVE repayment plan right now that are even pending, if someone has been pending for a while, it may be best for them to contact their servicer, see what their servicer says. And by pending, I mean if they've have been trying to leave SAVE, but nothing has taken place yet. They need to double check with their servicer, and they may need to opt in to re-enroll in whatever income plan that there is. I've had a lot of clients that are experiencing that. And there was this kind of turbulent place earlier this year when those new court decisions came out that I think a lot of applications kind of got lost. And so there's, although the studentaid.gov says they're pending, the servicer may need to clarify that on some next steps for them, if it's better for them just to re-enroll again through like a paper application directly with the servicer and kind of supersede what's been pending. But borrowers enrolled in SAVE and are eligible for public service loan forgiveness, we definitely want to be looking at those alternative income-driven repayment options, helping them apply for an alternative IDR, with the expectation that comparatively to the SAVE repayment, their income or their payment will increase. There are application delays, and so we want to be very clear about that this could take a while. Interest will accrue during the period that the application is pending, but they'll be placed in an administrative forbearance. And after 60 days, this was the guidance, is that they're supposed to be moved to a 0% interest forbearance if the application processing takes longer than 60 days. If you're enrolled in SAVE and eligible for cancellation now, or for PSLF cancellation now, the process is to go ahead and file for your public service loan forgiveness at this current time. Through that process, the borrower will most likely get denied, okay? And then they will submit a request of that PSLF reconsideration. And so this was some guidance that was solicited, and so I wanted to include it here. This was guidance by the department to include the following in your public service loan forgiveness reconsideration request. I have at least 120 months of approved qualifying employment, and I am seeking PSLF discharge through PSLF buyback. Please assess my eligibility for PSLF buyback. So that's the key right there to write when you do the reconsideration. If you are approved, the borrowers will get a notification if they're approved or denied. If they're approved, the borrower will then get a buyback agreement. The total amount to be paid back will need to be paid within 90 days. Okay. That sometimes is it's like, for what it's worth, that can be a large ask from a borrower who for the last 18 months has not made a student loan payment. Okay. They're not going to just get the consideration and get it canceled. There is an amount that would need to be paid in order to catch up for those time periods in which your payments did not count. Okay. And that's where I put the last note, is just to make sure the buyback program is right for you and right for the borrowers. And borrowers not enrolled in SAVE but eligible for public service loan forgiveness, I mean, there's not like an impetus or an urgency for them to remove themselves, but the ones that are close to getting forgiveness may want to do so in the next 45 days. If they can reach that 20-year forgiveness timeline, if they're very close, this needs to be considered to move forward and apply for income-based repayment before the end of the year. Interest is accruing again, but outside of that, payments are still on pause. So it's really what can the borrower handle financially? and but understanding and educating them on the consequences if they were to remain unsaved. I hope you guys, if you have any questions on anything that we've covered so far, please feel free, pop those in the Q&A. But now that we've covered essentially what counselors need to know about the IDR forgiveness and SAVE, it really is a lot. And in the media, they didn't make it seem like it was that much, right? But even as I explain this, I try to break it down, but it is, it's a lot, like I said, it's a lot of acronyms. It's a lot of like having to have a close pulse on the student loan space for this to come across like seamlessly, that it all makes sense. But we really should be back to normal, basically, outside of SAVE remaining on pause. And now that there's some oversight. So that's like the biggest takeaway, is that the agreement allows things kind of to proceed as they normally should have been, to have oversight and transparency on helping borrowers, who have applied. And I think those are some big takeaways. I do want to shift gears because there is a broader story that's kind of unfolding, and the credit and the mortgage markets that can directly affect the clients you're working with every day. So we're going to shift and move over to Dave, and that's Dave Danielson. He and I have worked together now for the last 6 years. He's going to take us into some of kind of the other headlines that are happening right now, collections and delinquency and what credit bureaus are reporting. So Dave, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Melissa. Ebony, let's go to the next slide. I want to go through these quickly. I see there's some questions and our time is limited. I want to make sure we get a chance to get to the questions that are being asked. This slide and one more are the only two that I had. What we want you to know is that from a market dynamic perspective, broader big picture, we're seeing delinquency rates increasing pretty dramatically. Melissa's touched on 7 million plus in SAVE. SAVE is in forbearance. As you know, as housing counselors, loans that are in forbearance can have a negative impact, or certainly a challenging impact on DTI calculations. We can touch on more of that, but just remember that SAVE is in forbearance. That may be a motivation for people to move out of SAVE. There's also we're seeing our program, Student Debt Solutions, we see thousands of people coming through it as we have over the last decade or more. And we see these impacts, people that are now getting tax returns withheld and are now suddenly, believe it or not, after 10 years saying, hey, I have to do something with my student loans. So tax liens, or tax returns, wage garnishments, just the simple fact of reporting to the credit bureaus the status of loans with these delinquency rates are hitting people of 100 to 150 points or more. Ebony, let's touch on the next slide really quickly. And some of the statements that have come out here, the New York Fed, we follow a lot. They often have a lot to say about summary analysis. This chart comes out of that. And so people with student loans tend to have a slightly lower average credit score than people without. People with student loans tend to have a lower success rate in purchasing homes. They're purchasing lesser priced homes than people without. And certainly there's nothing here to suggest that, that people with student loans are not a good client or anything, but they are burdened. They do have challenges. And what we're here to say is, and what we say to our clients and friends every day is, try to take action. One of the things that we've done with Student Debt Solutions, we have our partnership with NHRC, and I'm sure we can find links. The actual discount, we've had some changes in pricing. Our discount is about 40% for the NHRC members over list. But even more important is that we don't charge anybody a price for seeing what your options are. So we really encourage people. There's no credit card up front, and I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch, but we really want to help you and your clients, and there is no cost. We're trying to help research what are your default resolution strategies. Are there any cancellations you're eligible for being in a school that closed before you got a degree or some such issue, along with the repayment options and We're looking at private loans as well. It's something that early on we had a really positive discussion with Ellie and the NHRC team about that, which is an impact. We see, because so few people are in income-driven programs, we see in our program on average savings of about 50% on monthly payments. It tends to rough out to about $330 a month. And we've also had housing counselors who have told us that if you can reduce a monthly payment by about $300, it can have a 30 to 40,000 increase in, for lack of a better term, purchasing power or buying power that could enable clients. So we're big fans of, if you're not sure, go to whatever your solution is. Certainly SDS is an option in the marketplace to at least see what your options are. And with that, Ebony, I want to wrap up quickly here, because I do want to give people a chance to get the questions answered that have come up. Our contact information is here. We're happy to help you. Reach out, let us know if we can help you or help your clients or answer any questions. So, Ebony, I'm not sure if it's you or Miss Ivy who's going to call out the questions, but I know there's some questions in there, and I wanted to see us get a chance to ask them or answer them. I think Melissa's going to be handling most of these. So, Ellie, it may
none
be
of the
you.
above.
Sorry.
It'll be me.
Ellie, I apologize. I should
That's
have known
okay.
better.
That's okay. Okay, so one of the first questions I have, you all sent us a summary PDF, which I was just really trying to find to put it into the chat, but I would like to have some clarity in my own brain about what happened and what created the need for, I think it sounds like there was some sort of lawsuit that got settled, or some sort of something that ended up in court. So just a little bit about what happened and what created the kerfuffle, and then why
With
are we now talking about, and here are the changes. So
with Save, you mean specifically, or just more in general?
just in general with
Oh,
around student
I
loans.
can take Save and I'll grab it, because most of the rest of the questions Melissa will have to handle.
Well,
But
Dave, I'm actually going
no,
to jump in because
okay. See, I
sorry, not
told
to
you.
step on you, but
No. That's
it
fine.
was why the kerfuffle with Save. So basically, the only income-driven repayment plan that we have that was approved by Congress is income-based repayment. So it is the only repayment plan that went through congressional approval, meaning it was voted in, right? So it went through the House and the Senate, and it created a plan. The other income-driven repayment plans that we have are income contingent and pay as you earn. These were not congressionally approved. They were created in the same sense as SAVE, which was through negotiated rulemaking. And basically, you can negotiated rulemaking is a platform where we can kind of redline the Higher Education Act of 1965. And we can add statutory language in there, and there's a panel that's put together, and it can be commented by the public. But basically, the department can authorize changes inside of the higher education plan. SAVE was created that way, income contingent was created that way, and so was pay as you earn. And so I am talking high. And so when the courts made a decision on SAVE, they said, listen, they had some issues and it was put into limbo and it was put on pause. And basically the interpretation was, from the way I understand it, is that, pay as you earn and ICR were also created through the same channel. And so because SAVE was being questioned as in its legality, then pay as you earn and ICR were too. And then that was like the original court decision, which was like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Now, the most recent court decision, the Department of Education kind of took its own, the Trump administration now sitting there, kind of took its own interpretation and said, well, we're also including income-based repayment as well, because we need to update systems. We need to kind of, it was their interpretation of the last court decision that said, well, we're also including income-based. So that's, I don't know if that clearly answers or not, but essentially there was like tie-ins to save, that the way it was, looked at was, well, we're gonna pause pay as you earn in ICR as well.
Okay, so I'll get to the questions. So this person thought it was 10 years for public service loan forgiveness or after 120 monthly payments.
Yes. So public service loan forgiveness is 120 qualifying payments, which would be 10 years of payments if every single payment made was a qualifying payment. It would only take 10 years. But sometimes we find, you might have to skip a payment, or you missed a recertification and it can extend, or maybe your employment, didn't qualify.
Yeah.
But
Melissa, this question may have stemmed from the IDR recount, which allows it to be sometimes less than. If I've been teaching for 3 years, or if I've been in a nonprofit for 3 years, I might not have the full 120, right?
No, I don't know. If please feel free, if that was your question, to expand on that if you want to give a little more context. Forgiveness under an income-driven repayment plan is 20 or 25 years. Forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness is 10 years.
Right, but aren't there situations where I can get credit for time I've already been doing this?
Not for public service loan forgiveness anymore.
Okay, then I'm mistaken. Sorry.
That's okay.
So essentially, it's not 10 years calendar-wise. It's 10 years in the that is the equal of 120 payments.
Right.
Eligibility, yes.
Right.
And
okay.
many things can play into that, right? Like one of the big things with public service loan forgiveness is, if you're with a private nonprofit, maybe some months out of that year qualified and some months didn't. So there can be gaps within a year based off of how your employer qualified. So there's some kind of blurry lines around just even if you made 12 payments, for that course of that year that were on time and were qualifying, if the employment may have some gaps in it, if the employer qualified during that period. So you have to be very careful. It's not just a flat 10 years. Just because you worked for 10 years doesn't mean you had 120 qualifying payments.
Okay. Have you seen instances where there were no payment counts listed on studentaid.gov for borrowers who were in an IDR plan?
Yes. The answer is yes. So they did take that down. The department removed the visibility towards your IDR tracking for an extended period of time. For this year, I forget the month that it happened. Dave, I want to say it was around April of this year. And so the department did remove that tracking from the dashboard. But under this agreement, I could see that that's probably back up there. I work with clients. I have many roles in what I do, but I still work with clients. And I believe in the last time I was with the client, it was back up. So it's just, you've got to go and check, make sure if it's up there or not.
Okay, I want to just quickly pop this into the chat. This is the information that you sent us about the summary of the IDR forgiveness. Okay, so that everybody has access to that. Okay, a client who works for a nonprofit organization wants to make extra payments to the principal of the debt each month. In addition to the regular payment, she wants to accelerate the 120 payments because she's already 65 and desires to retire soon. Is this possible?
Yeah,
So essentially, is there a way to make less than 120 payments and get qualified for the public
yeah.
service loan forgiveness?
So I believe the answer now is yes, through some changes. Previously, that would have been, it would have been just paying, they would have been non-qualifying, but I believe in July of 2025 that did change, that you can make some extra payments on the account.
Okay. If you find something different to that, an answer to that question, let us know and we'll get it
Oh,
out to
absolutely, yeah.
the group.
Because
Okay.
previously, I believe it because it was like a big deal. Because technically, any extra payments were they would then be unqualified. Um, and so I believe they did some reconsideration of that through negotiated rulemaking a couple years ago, which then were elicited in July of 2025, I want to say.
Okay. For educators who have been working in the nonprofit organization and public school arenas who have applied for public service loan forgiveness but have the old servicer Navient, do they have to apply for a plan under Mohela? Mohela, however you say that. And questions in the Q&A box, please, so I don't lose track.
I am a little confused by this one because Navient is no longer eligible to service any federal student loans at all.
So the
Um,
question is, do they have to reapply now under Mohela?
oh
If they
no, they shouldn't have to. Mohila is actually no longer the servicer that oversees public service loan forgiveness. So for this client, what I would have them do is log into Department of Ed. So all public service loan forgiveness is now managed directly by the Department of Education. And so there is a whole public service loan forgiveness tracking that is now done. There's tools within studentaid.gov. And so if this client has or had history on their account for public service loan forgiveness with Navient, that should have been transferred to the Department of Ed. So I've seen clients that have history going back to the early 2000s at studentaid.gov through the tracking tools. And so that client would need to go into studentaid.gov and see what's visible there under PSLF. And then to remember that with public service loan forgiveness, we're not just certifying one time, right? We need to do this every year. And so what that borrower or client would need to do is to make sure that the employment that or is she's currently working with that nonprofit, that she's gone back to the last date that she certified. Because if the last time she certified, she was with Navient, she could be a few years behind on updating her certification. So she just would want to know, like, when was her last certified and qualified payment? And they give those details now. You see every payment per loan, and if if they think a payment would have qualified because they see that you were enrolled in like an income plan, then there'll be a little description, employer certification not on file. And so you'll be able to see every single month. And you just want to make sure that you get that employer certification form completed and have your employer certify it from, the date of first employment. And if they're still employed, and hopefully they haven't switched employers between them because they would need to go to multiple and submit multiple, but that all goes into Department of Ed now. So that can be uploaded at studentaid.gov, and then those counts would be updated.
Okay, with the different changes that have been going on with student loans, if a borrower has already been forgiven through PSLF, would any of these changes affect them?
No.
Hallelujah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So somebody was asking about is there any kind of free counseling? And so I had a little bit of kind of back and forth asking for some clarity. And basically what they're talking about is sometimes things are really complicated and it's
Mm-hmm.
hard for the housing counselor to really understand what to do next. And so We do have the contracts with both you and with with Savvy, but if
Mhm.
you would talk a little bit, because you all do private and federal, and you do a little bit more one-on-one interaction with the housing counseling industry. So if you could talk a little bit about what resources are available, not as a sales pitch, I know Dave mentioned that, but just so that the
Yeah.
housing counselors know what resource you might be able to offer them in these circumstances where things get kind of complicated.
I think the simplest thing that that I usually try to point out is that the relationship, our product is going to do a complete analysis and deliver. Here's what your possible eligibility or possible options are to reduce payments, and here's how much by. So it's a very specific, thoroughly calculated answer, and it's available for anyone who wants to click on the link. I think, Ellie, we've got links that are available as part of our relationship and agreement. The only payment happens, as far as we're concerned, if somebody actually wanted assistance to make their plan a reality. I need to know the forms and the instructions and maybe some counseling. But otherwise, we just encourage people go through, see what your options are.
Okay.
Is that what you were looking for, Ellie?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, folks on the phone should know that you are a resource if they are
Yes.
ending up with somebody who's really complicated and they need some help helping
Yes.
them, getting
And
the consumer through to the
and
final
right.
phase.
Yeah.
And we've done quite a bit of work to make our, chat bots AI so they can answer a broader range of questions. We've added some live phone support to try to help people through the process. I think the biggest challenge people face is getting their NSLDS file from studentaid.gov. And the reason that file is so essential is that that gives us a chronicled history of the loans, the type of loans, and if we didn't have that file, we couldn't do default resolution strategies, or we couldn't do cancellation options. And we've added pulling credit reports, which gives us some insight as to what are the possibilities with private loans.
Okay, somebody just put into the Q&A box. They just want to say thank you for all the information.
Of course.
All right, I received a payment notice from Mohila about 2 months ago, and they advised that my ACH will be resumed on November 18th. But then I received another email notice that the repayment is again suspended. I am so not sure what to expect from Mohila. I have budgeted for the debits from my checking account, and they are always changing. It's difficult to reach a representative from Mohila on the phone. Not a real question there, but any thoughts?
Yeah, so I would first, if someone was to say this to me, my first question is what is your repayment plan you're enrolled in? Because if it's Save, there is a lot of, cross communications on you have an account coming due and you have but then no, it's repaused again, those kinds of things. It's not uncommon for this kind of misinformation and miscommunication to be occurring. Now, Mohila is a very large servicer too, because they used to oversee PS. It is Save. Yeah, that's what I thought. So your payment is paused, and it's really paused indefinitely, and that's something that you're just going to commonly see. There is no defined start date for Save. Understand though, like if you're with a nonprofit and you're public service loan forgiveness, and or close to income driven repayment, please take a look at some of the other options. And I know that it's difficult, to incorporate a student loan into a budget, especially during these times and when it's not something you've had to focus on, but it can move you closer to that process. Um, Save for me, I have clients who come and I've seen 2026, March of 2026. And then I've seen that also be June of 2026 being reported on the NSLDS by the servicer. So it's just one of those, just stay up to date, NHRC, I'm pretty sure you're going to have some information on once payments are going to resume under Save and things like that. So it should be good.
Okay, what if someone is severely delinquent?
Yeah, we actually we talk about this often. We have little monthly webinars we do for our partners and things. And we just we've talked about delinquency a lot because delinquency is a really big problem right now. I've never seen in the 14 years that I have been doing student loans. I have not seen delinquency this bad. So if someone is delinquent and severely delinquent, you can look at, is there any eligible deferment or forbearance that can post date the delinquency? So you can start a deferment. And we know severe delinquency, it's now hitting the credit report. And as Dave had the credit report stats, we can understand the impact on that for a consumer. We can leverage these postponements to backdate severe delinquency. And in times like certain deferments and things, it will even update through the credit bureaus as well and retroactively take back kind of that bad history. So these are going to be things like your economic hardship deferment. And so there's several different types of deferments and forbearance. It's not just flat out, oh, a forbearance. We can get a mandatory student loan debt burden forbearance or a general forbearance. And with deferment, we want to look at those because they are a little bit stronger to help correct the credit a bit more. Economic hardship deferment being one of them. If your clients are eligible for one of those, they can backdate that to the first missed payment. And so they're not going to owe all of that back due amount, right? Which could be thousands of dollars if they're severely delinquent. And that's going to set them current. They can also extend that a few months into the future. You can typically get deferments and forbearances depending on which one, 6 months to 12 months. Most of them are going to be 12 months long. That is typically a first line. So we want to get that backdated, and then we want to review any other eligible payment plans that may help that client continue down the path of payment. And so if we can lower that payment or fit it into their budget, right? So then we're going to go into holistic overview. Let's look at the budget. What can we afford? But we have to then have those payment options in front of us. So maybe it's an income-driven repayment, or maybe we need to consolidate. If there are no forbearance options under severe delinquency, and let's say the servicer just flat out says, nope, we're not taking it. You've over exceeded. You've used all of it. You don't qualify. If they are eligible to consolidate, they can. And consolidation, if they do it before, they can do it while they're in default. But they're able to consolidate, and that basically resets the loan. And they don't have to pay the back due amounts. It would close out those accounts. Now those accounts would be closed, and they would have a new loan under the consolidation. But a lot of times consolidation can offer a lower payment, because even income-driven repayment can be high for certain borrowers. So consolidation is extending out that term, lowering that monthly payment. That can be an option.
So there's a couple of different questions about the 10 years, $120 payment forgiveness, and then the 20-year student loan forgiveness.
Oh, that's
So if you
common.
could just very clearly lay out, here's what the 10-year one is, and then this whole thing about doubling up your payments, and then here's the 20-year one, and separate that out. And I want to remind folks, it's easier for me if you put your questions into the Q&A box so that I don't lose track of it in the scrolling chat box. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to be the one answering all the questions. Dave, do you want to take a stab, or you want me to
No,
just keep
I
on my
was
roll?
I was just going to say that this person said they understood the 10-year. I think the way I've always described it, and you may refine this around the edges, is that income-based repayment plans allow you to set your payments based on your income levels. Income minus expenses equals discretionary income, and it's a percentage of that number. But the trade-off is a 10-year standard plan turns into a 20-year plan or a 25-year plan, depending on the type of repayment. But if you're in an eligible PSLF, public service loan forgiveness occupation, then you got to get a double benefit because that you get the income-based repayment payment levels, but you only have to do it for 10 years instead of the full 20 or 25. That's my sort of elementary summarization. So clean that up around the edges, or maybe that's okay.
I think, yeah, I'll overcomplicate it with everything rolling through my head to try to explain it. So it's as simple as that. You have forgiveness that occurs by being in an income plan, and you have forgiveness that occurs by being in an income plan plus your occupation.
Right.
With the occupation, it's 10 years. By just being in the income plan, it's 20 years or 25, depending on which plan.
And
And is there
at
a
the end of the
specific amount that you have to pay every month during that 20-year time period?
Based on your income, yeah.
based
So
on
based
income.
on your income.
Yeah.
So whether you have paid the full amount that is with the servicer by the end of the 20 years, with that particular plan, you're done.
Yeah, at the end of the day, forgiveness equals remaining balance after I've finished my repayment plan. That's what forgiveness is.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is back from Erica, who asked the specific question. So she is in a nonprofit and has submitted her PSLF application. She's not made 120 payments. So are you saying that she should consider an income-based repayment plan to get a different payment plan to continue making payments to reach my 120 payments to be eligible for PSLF, public service?
Yes. Yeah, so that is what I would consider doing. You don't have to. You would still be deemed as like semi-eligible right now while you're in save. And if you're continuing to submit your employer certification, but technically the time that you are in save does not count towards any forgiveness at all. And that was the last court decision that was issued earlier in the year for clarification around the save litigation. It further defined for borrowers who are in save, there will be no forgiveness associated with the save repayment plan. So right now, as you linger in the plan and are enrolled in it, being on the pause, you do not have any eligible time towards public service loan forgiveness. So you can change that by switching to an alternative income-driven repayment plan. So assessing what those options would be. And typically you are going to see increases because SAVE was set at a pretty low payment amount, 5 to 10% of discretionary income. So it was very, it was very generous and that. So.
Yeah, and that's really, that's why it got the second court case. It was viewed by the people that opposed it, particularly state attorneys general, as too generous. It started off at 10, then it was going to go down to 5% of discretionary income at the end on July 1st of 25, which is why it was stopped. And in July of 26, so there's another question here. Sorry, Ellie, about percentages while I'm on the topic. Typically, it's 10%, maybe 15%, based on the type of plan you're in, IBR versus ICR. But it's in that nature, in that general realm. The coming up in January or July of 26, there's going to be some new plans, and they're more likely going to be 15% and more likely going to be 30 years, although none of that is decided and made legislation yet. But there's another motivation to try to get into something prior. You won't be pushed out to 30 years. It'll be 20 or 25 years, and it'll be 10 or 15%. Most commonly, it's 10%, 20 years, but they vary by the type of plan.
So what is being offered to help out with Parent Plus loans?
So I've got a lot of information for borrowers who are on Parent Plus loans. I think a big takeaway right now would be that borrowers with Parent Plus loans are not eligible for income-driven repayment. They must first consolidate. And if they consolidate their Parent Plus loans, they can become eligible for Typically and traditionally, it was income-contingent repayment plan, the ICR, which is a higher percentage of income. As Dave mentioned, ICR is the less generous of income plan options, as it seeks kind of that higher discretionary income level to set a monthly payment. However, with reconciliation, just as the department said it is removing the partial financial hardship for income-based repayment, they are also allowing until July 1st of 2026, if you are a Parent Plus loan borrower and you consolidate, you can get into an income-based repayment. This has never been allowed before. It took some loopholes. Has a Parent Plus loan borrower gotten into income-based in the past? Yes, but they had to jump through many loopholes in order to achieve that. Now this just allows a borrower to file a consolidation and they can go into income-based repayment. It's a pretty generous, and consideration. If they're newer borrowers, they can get a 10% of discretionary, a calculation of their monthly payment based on 10% as opposed to 20. So we are seeing massive reductions in the amount being paid by Parent Plus loan borrowers if they're doing the IVR, consolidating and doing income-based as opposed to the income contingent repayment. So that's like one thing, but it ends July 1st, 2026. So
it's a very good deal and a great opportunity. And just for what it's worth, a little context, Melissa did some stats recently that showed that, and we featured this in one of our webinars, a shockingly high percentage of student loans are non-productive, in deference, in default, what have you. So the motivation of this administration is not to be super generous, but let's get people back into paying something. So this, I think, was, I'd like to assume was part of that motivation to get people paying instead of defaulting. And it is a good deal for Parent Plus loan holders, but it does have a time frame, up until July of 26.
And that is a change. That's a big change because that question comes up in every single student loan webinar. And this is the first time that we've heard, yes, there is something that can be done.
I do a lot of teaching and training and things, and I have a whole section on like, what do we do for Parent Plus loan borrowers? There is, beyond this strategy, there are other strategies, but you do have to think of it as something very strategic in implementation. Because one thing I know for certain, like if I have a Parent Plus loan borrower, they're worried about retirement. They're worried about just, I had a borrower 85 and still working as a bus driver, trying to pay IRS tax debt. They still have a lot of other things going on where Social Security income is really their main source of income. And in those cases too, we have to really strategically think about the options. I didn't want to bog down the question with all the other things. I think the biggest importance right now is consolidation into IBR is an option for Parent Plus loan borrowers, but it's limited. And we should be looking at that as like, does this help, right? Can this lower the payment to something they can afford? But outside of that, there is a lot of strategic approach to handling Parent Plus loan borrowers. And something myself that as a counselor for like the first 3-4 years, I was even developing the software. And as a counselor, it was something I was scared to talk to clients about. It was a rough, because you always hate to tell a client like, well, there's nothing we can do for you, right? So it was intimidating. But as the years have gone on, I've developed, those steps and how to have that conversation and what to look for. And it's interesting that there are a lot of strategies.
Okay, can a client consolidate a single loan that is getting close to 180 past due mark if deferment or forbearance is not an option?
Yes. A single loan, so long that it isn't a single direct consolidation loan already. So if it's a direct consolidated loan and it's a single loan, then no. But if it's a single loan, just like a normal, it could be a Perkins loan, a one parent plus loan, an FFEL consolidated loan, just one single director, sub Stafford loan. Yes, you can.
Okay. All right. So I'll try to ask this so that it's clear as it comes out. But so if your employment qualifies you for public service loan forgiveness and you have applied previously, but are still under save with another servicer who is kind of ignoring your request, should you change servicers or reapply with Department of Education?
Yeah. So if you use like a paper application, potentially, I'm not sure, to originally request a different payment plan, um, I would go to student. So where I would start, I would go to studentaid.gov and I would check the status of your income-driven repayment plan request. So you'll see it there as like pending, and you'll see a date if it was applied for. Now, if you went directly to the servicer, you're going to need to, if you can't get them on the phone, you need to call them, or you need to get them on the phone and say, what's my status? Online, they may have sent you a message. They may have, some notifications depending on the servicer of what the status is. But you may have to pick up the phone again if you did a paper application directly with them and say, hey, what's going on here? And if they've lost it or it's still pending, technically you should be able to look in your account. And if you have a pending application, then you should be in a forbearance, an administrative forbearance. And I know you said you're in save, so you're already, that may not give a lot of clarity. So call and just kind of see. But yes, at this point, if it has been a substantially long time, just reapplying through the Department of Ed could definitely be an option. And if you already have an application with them, they'll know it. It'll show you like a message, like you've already completed this. So that's what I would do. You can't change servicers unless you consolidate. So you don't get a choice who your servicer is with the Department of Ed. It's gonna be, it is what it is.
So you're saying if the servicer actually did process the application, Department of Education will know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so if this person goes into Department of Education, starts the application, and at the end hits submit, it may be, oh no, you already have applied.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And you can find a status of process and submitted applications on studentaid.gov as well. So,
Okay.
and
So
generally,
it doesn't hurt though to go to the Department of Ed website and try to submit a PSLF application if you're not sure.
the income driven, I would just go and honestly try to do it again. Because these things have been lost in translation. I've seen a lot of times that, it's been like a few months and nothing's happening. After you first submitted, and let's say, because again, I don't know, but if you submitted a paper application with your servicer, it should have had something like, we've received your request. And then you should be getting emails or have message notifications that are talking about like, we're processing your income driven repayment request form, or we need additional information. A lot of times what I'm finding is that my clients aren't so much getting emails directly anymore from their servicer, but their messages in their portal. So you have to be actively logging into your servicer and checking your message notification center to be looking for these updates, because I've had a lot of clients that are not getting emails that specifically talk about what they're doing. Like, oh, you submitted this on this date and this is the status. They're coming in the forms of notification messages in the servicer. So I would check my servicer first for this particular case and see what messages I have. And if that may give you clarity, and it may not. If it does not, go to studentaid.gov and I would just reapply to get that ball rolling again.
Okay. What is the percentage of discretionary income considered?
That's what we were talking about earlier, based on, if I take income minus my expenses, I end up with some remainder. Depending on the plan, it could be 10%, it could be 15%. I think that's what that question's referring to.
Okay.
ICR typically 15%, IBR 10%. I don't know if that's ironclad, but that's most common.
Okay. And so this person who's been talking about their student loan said, yes, SAVE was absolutely more affordable. And from what they see, the income-based repayment at 150 more in monthly payments. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for clarifying.
That's
Okay, so am I understanding that on SAVE, which I was on during my public service loan forgiveness time, I won't be eligible to buy back those months during this forbearance, even if I switch to income-based repayment, this whole 2 years didn't count.
It will count if you do the buyback at the end. So that's the trade-off right now, is you can buy them back at the end. So your save time is not eligible for forgiveness right now. But what the department is saying is, hey, we will open up the buyback program for save borrowers so that they can reconsider their public service loan forgiveness for the time they were in save. So for the whole 2 years, the 24 months, you're going to go about your business, switch to IBR or not, stay in save, but eventually you will have to move from save. And then you'll continue down public service loan forgiveness. When you get to 120 payments, you will file your final application for public service loan forgiveness. It says like it's the same as the employer certification form right now, but there's a checkbox that says, I believe I am eligible for my 120 payments. Please review like my file, basically summarizing. But you will submit that final one and you will get a response from the Department of Ed that says you are, this would say you are denied because you're missing eligible payments. So then you'll go to the buyback. You will file for PSLF reconsideration. And it's through that you formally request to have your account reviewed and that you would like to buy back the time that you were enrolled and save. And I gave the formal language in one of the slides here today. And then you will get a contract for the 24 months that you were in save. They will estimate what you should have paid every month, how many payments you missed, and you will have a total that you need to pay back. And you have 3 months to pay that off in order to get the 120, months and get the forgiveness.
Okay. So somebody is asking about there was a lot of information, and this is not a question for you all. I'm going to be answering this question, but there's a lot of information, and can we get a transcript? So everybody should know this is being recorded. It will be placed on our YouTube channel, and Miss Ivy can pop the link to our YouTube channel into the chat. And there on the YouTube channel, you can request a transcript, or you can just fast forward through and listen to the information. But that is the way. Okay, so I see that you understand my answer. All right. So I think that is all of the questions, and I'm gonna thank you both very much for taking the time today to wade through all of this information, as if things couldn't get any more confusing with student loans. They just did. Oh wait, did somebody just pop some? Oh no, somebody's just saying thank you. Thank you both very much again for your
Thank you.
time and efforts today.